the Omotoso case. There were witnesses, there were people who experienced it, people who had that trauma. So now he's being sent back to Nigeria as a free man. I don't think I have faith in the justice system.
The law has nothing to do necessarily with morals and ethics. It's about certain principles. If something is not proven, it's not proven.
It's Sunday night, 7 p.m. The fourth season of its Topical starts right now. That pause is getting longer as the seasons go, isn't it? Well, a very good evening to South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman. This is indeed a brand new season of It's Topical. Yes, we're in our fourth season. Thank you for having us, our digital audience with us tonight. Important part of the program of the years, made up of members of the public who have expressed a keen interest in our topic of discussion. So we invite them to be part of the show, to observe, but more importantly, to ask questions to our guests. That's the aim of It's Topical. We bring in the people with the answers to the people who need the answers. The not guilty verdict of Timothy Omotoso and his co-accused has drawn a raft of reactions. Over 30 serious charges. Not one of these charges could stick. Many of Omotoso's supporters would see this judgment as a confirmation of his innocence. You've seen the celebrations on the streets. Now, juxtapose that with the pain seen in the eyes and heard in the voice of Cheryl Zondi. Government has also reacted. The Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities saying the acquittal of Omotoso serves as a judicial turning point for many women who came forward to testify as both victims and survivors. The Justice Minister expressing deep concern regarding the manner in which the case was handled by the prosecuting team. The judge herself was very scathing in her judgment, criticizing the poor quality of the state's cross-examination. Look, the bar is high. Case law, tried principle. The prosecution must prove its case beyond reasonable doubt. A mere preponderance of possibilities or probabilities is seemingly not enough. Beyond a reasonable doubt. What does that mean? Simply put, the evidence presented must leave no room for doubt about the defendant's guilt. Remember, an accused person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. That's the standard. Now, the question then becomes, are our prosecutors up to the standard? The state might have failed in this case, but is it fair to call into question the ability of all prosecutors? We have to separate fact from feel. Although feel, it gives us a good indication of the temperature of views on a particular matter. That's important. In the foreword for the 2023-2024 NPA annual report, Advocate Shamila Batoy, in reference to sexual offences cases, wrote, despite important achievements, as well as a high conviction rate of 78%, and increasingly long sentences being meted out in the court on a daily basis, our country still requires a whole of society approach to address the scourge, to ensure that reporting rate among victims is improved and that a greater number of reported cases results in convictions, end quote. So, as ordinary citizens, how are we to digest the recent ruling in the context of the strength of this criminal justice system in this country and South Africa's fight against gender-based violence and femicide? It leads us to the question of the week, and we ask you, in the light of the Omotoso judgment, what do you make of how the National Prosecuting Authority handled the case? Let us know at SABC News_TV. Tonight's show is not about relitigating the case. Oh no, it's about getting a better understanding of the challenges facing the state. It's about understanding the court's reasoning. Let's walk and talk. Head over to the magic board, get your context. Big umbrella question. Is the NPA fit for purpose? Where are the shortcomings, right? How are they placed in order to deliver justice to the people of South Africa? The need to strive for high conviction rates, but never at the expense of justice. What does that mean to you? We'd love to hear your thoughts at SABC News_TV. Perspective coming up. All right, I want to tee up the discussions, what we know and why it matters. Let's bring in SABC News journalist Lerato Fikisi, live for us in the Eastern Cape. She's been covering the story very, very closely over the years. Lerato, good to see you. Good to have your better mind on the program tonight. You were in court when the judgment was read out. In terms of the reaction from the gallery and the accused, what did you witness from your vantage point?
Very good evening to you, Blaine. It was literally absolute silence from the ANC Women's League and those who came in support of the witnesses. They literally had nothing to say. I just remember turning back and looking at some of the members of the ANC Women's League seated behind me, close to Cheryl Zondi, and they literally dropped their jaws and had nothing to say. All they kept on saying was, oh my word, oh my word, oh my gosh, this can't be true. But literally from people that had previously been very vocal in court about their views towards this case, when that judgment was passed, they literally were left speechless and nothing to say. Then on the other side, seated behind them, were members of the Jesus Dominion International, which is Timothy Omotoso's church. And even before the judgment was finalized in terms of giving a non-guilty verdict, the moment Judge Irma Schoeman said that the state failed to prove beyond reasonable doubt about the evidence provided, someone from JDI literally went, yes! And someone from the police actually calmed them down and said no. And then after that, we heard the non-guilty verdict. And just seated behind me, Blaine, not literally about 2 seats, and actually a seat behind me was Cheryl Zondi. Yeah. And I remember looking back at her, and as soon as she heard that Omotoso and 2 coaches were not guilty, she looked down and she broke down in tears, and she couldn't contain her pain and disappointment at what has just been read of a non-guilty verdict for Omotoso and his 2 co-accused.
Yeah, that was an important part. She spoke to us as well. She spoke to the team in the Eastern Cape, giving us a sense, pulling back the curtain, not, keeping anything back, laying it out how she feels about the verdict. I wonder, in terms of the other people that you spoke to, what was the reaction in terms of the impact of people or victims and going through the process to get to being a survivor? Are they confident in the system to come forward and tell their story?
Blaine, we also got to interview the chairperson of the CRL, and she was saying that this is really a blow in the face of the victims, because it is so hard for any victim to relive the experience, and I think more than anything else to relive it in the court, where your evidence is poked holes, your evidence is scrutinized by the defense in an attempt to try and weaken your case. And you must understand, Blaine, that this happened to many of these girls when they are 13 and 12, and I was saying to someone earlier on that it's hard to recall what happened to you a year ago. Now try and recall what happened to you 7 years ago, and to be able to give details, because now you are going to we're going to be in a witness stand, you're going to be cross-examined, you're going to be questioned. What you thought was truth is going to be questioned as well. So it was very tough, and the CRL chairperson was just saying that this is a slap in the face for many victims who see coming forward as very frightening, but then hope that justice will be served. And she was saying she hopes that this won't be an indication to other victims that they mustn't come forward. If anything, they must still come forward, because it's the only way that people that commit such crimes will be prosecuted. So, speaking on behalf of the victims, and someone who's also close to Cheryl Zondi, the chairperson of CRL, was saying that more must be done in terms of prosecutors, a quality of prosecutors, making sure that the NPA really employs the best for such cases, especially for such a high-profile case that got international and local coverage. She expected more, and her greatest fear was saying that it's the victims now who have to live with the guilt, who have to live with the questions of, was it worth it to even come forward? Wasn't I better just keeping quiet with what allegedly happened when I was 13? And she was saying she hopes that it won't be a situation where victims are saying, you know what, better that I just die in the shame than go public about it, because when you go public, you could get a non-guilty verdict, and then you have to face the shame thereof. Yeah.
The viewers heard me calling for a clip that we have lined up. It's on the complainants that initially brought accusations or allegations against Pastor Timothy Omotoso. And here, Lerato, are some of them telling their stories to the SABC Special Assignment Program. This was back in 2017. Take a look.
I was very young. I know there are those who experienced this much younger than I was, but I wasn't mentally capable of understanding. I didn't have the mental capacity to take in everything that was happening. That experience in itself was very painful for me.
I left firstly because of the things that he used to do. He would go around in the house, there'd be happy hour, he'd be spanking us, doing all those, being touchy. So I couldn't understand that how could God let such a thing happen to so many girls, and yet he says he's still God. So after I left, what I realized is that my spiritual belief, it went down the drain. Since the day I left there, I've never set foot in any church. To this day, when I think of going to a church, it's hard because I want to believe that God is still there.
Yeah, some of those voices brought to us by producers Lee McCabe and Cleopatra Jones, producer for It's Topical, but then on the program Special Assignment back in 2017. And that's the point, right, Lerato? 8 years. Have a look at this timeline. Back in 2017, the arrest of Omotoso, and you fast forward to present time, 2025. Talk to us, run through the timeline, the tick-tock of this case, the key turning points of this case, Lerato.
Ben, I think for me, as someone who's reported the case, the key turning points for me must definitely be three that I'm going to cite that I feel like were really the red flags in terms of the state's case towards the case of Timothy Omotoso and his two co-accused. I think one, when the former judge, Judge Makawula, was recused from this case, because I remember at that time J.D. Paulso was on the case, broke a story of how it was found that Judge Makawula was presiding over this case. Her wife was housing the witnesses in this case, and the judge, even in her judgment on last week, said how that was questionable, how a judge presiding such over a huge case could house witnesses, especially at a time, Blaine, where there was already accusations that the witnesses have been suborned to commit perjury. She said that prosecutorly and lawfully and ethically that was not correct. And I think the second turning point in this case, Blaine, must be the interference or alleged interference of former prosecutor Ncebantelwa, who eventually recused himself from this case. And two instances that came out from then was one, how in an email sent to prosecutor Ishmael Serfontein, it was leaked that Ncebantelwa did suborn witnesses to commit perjury, and there was proof from the defense stating that case. Also, which came out in the judgment, was how after Ncebantelwa was recused from this case, Cheryl Zondi then wrote to the NPA asking Ncebantelwa, who had been recused because of his interference in the case and his suborning of witnesses to commit perjury, how then Cheryl Zondi wrote to the NPA asking for Ncebantelwa to be brought back into the case. And Judge Irma Schoeman even said in a judgment that she had never heard in her life of a witness who is still part of a trial, who is still going to testify, had the gall and the guts to even call back a prosecutor who had already been recused from this case. And then I think the third one, which was, I feel like, the nail in the coffin in terms of the state case, was the issue of the closing arguments. You must understand, Blaine, that the state was given 9 days to try prove beyond reasonable doubt that there is a case here and evidence against the accused. For Omotoso alone, and this also came out in the judgment of Irma Schoeman, just for Omotoso alone, who at that time, Blaine, was facing 32 charges linked to not just small charges, rape, racketeering, and human trafficking, huge charges. They used literally the morning part, and the morning part in the law or in the court literally runs from about 9 o'clock when court would start for us and then would probably end at about 12 o'clock. So here is a man faced with 32 charges, right, and a case running from as far back as 2017 was arrested, and the state only used the morning part for Omotoso alone. And even more questionable, Blaine, when you got to the cross-examination, as journalists, we are not law experts, but we were also questioning how the cross-examination wasn't Blaine, like the judge said, an opportune time for the state now to poke holes at the evidence of the accused and to try get a specific narrative driven through the cross-examination. It was literally an asking of question where Omotoso was asked, for instance, did you do this? And then he would say no. And then there wouldn't be a proper scrutinizing of why you said that, where were you at that time? Cheryl says this, is this true? And try and make him drive towards such a narrative to get ultimately the verdict you want to get at the state. So the cross-examination, as defense Peter Doberman of the defense said, was a non cross-examination at all, and he's perfectly true in that, because sitting in court, you even thought to yourself, you actually went and said, what was that? And then after that, the state then did cross-examination on Zukiswa Sito and also Lusanda Sulane, and even then, Blaine, it was asking of questions as if you're asking someone, did you eat the apple? And then he says no. And then you leave it at that. And we were flabbergasted sitting there asking, is this the caliber of cross-examination that should be taking place in the courts? Just listening and whether, with no opinion, obviously, as journalists, but just asking ourselves, if 9 days has been given on a case so long, and when you look at Blaine, at how scrutinizing and how hectic the cross-examination was for the witnesses by the defense, you expected the same to be done now for the accused, where the first time people now get to hear Omotoso speak, and people were just like, this is a big moment to hear how the state is going to perform well versus how well the defense performed in their cross-examination. And in the end, Blaine, it proved that the cross-examination was just not sufficient. If anything, Judge Irma Schoeman called it disastrous, saying that it was no cross-examination at all.
Yeah, she called the prosecution team out, isn't it? And it's definitely will form part of the National Director of Public Prosecution's investigative report into the matter. We're told that that investigation is underway. Remember, a report was also requested by the Justice Minister, so that is imminent. That report that the NDPP has requested will take some time. I'm not sure if it's going to be ready by tomorrow, for example. So the NDPP will probably provide them with the information that they have at this stage, but it'll be interesting to see whether what Judge Irma Schoeman had to say was justified. Lerato Fikisi, thank you very much indeed for the context, as always appreciated. SABC News journalist from the Eastern Cape, Lerato Fikisi. Keep a close eye on the matter. The broader question, the umbrella question that we're asking you is whether the judge was justified in calling out the prosecution team. We will see what the report says. The broader question also is, what do you make of the handling of the case by the NPA? Let us know at SABC News _TV. Now, let's get a reaction from Omotoso, Timothy Omotoso, after that verdict was read, after that judgment was read. Take a look.
I thank God. I thank God. I give him all praise. I am 67 by July, next July. I've been in prison for 8 years. I think it's better for me to rest first. I've been in prison for 8 years at this age. So I think we should give some time for that.
Okay. Our question of the week: how do you think the NPA has handled this matter? Let us know at SABC News _TV. When we come back, the better legal minds on the program to discuss. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. Fourth season. Thank you very much indeed for inviting us into your living room, wherever you're watching, not only here in South Africa, but around the world, using SABC Plus, important tool to get some perspective on various issues. Tonight, we're talking the Timothy Omotoso case, the verdict, the not guilty verdict. It's given rise a raft of reactions to that verdict. What does that mean in the general fight against gender-based violence, sexual violence in this country? Let us know your thoughts at SABC News_TV. How do you think, in the light of the Omotoso judgment, what do you make of how the NPA handled this case? Please, we'd love to hear your thoughts. We have invited some legal minds to give us fresh perspective on this. Senior legal practitioner Thabo Masombuka is in studio with me. Thabo, thank you very much indeed for your time. And another legal mind joining us virtually is Matome Chidi. He's an attorney. Thank you very much indeed. Also, our digital audience, please, we need your questions for our guests. Raise your virtual hand. Do my very best to get you onto the program. Thabo, if I can start with you, and what the Judge Irma Schoeman, had said. The primary factor, unfortunately, is the lack of cross-examination of the accused. I'm quoting verbatim here. The cross-examination of the accused was of poor quality. Also, questioning the understanding of the definition of rape. The judge mentioning the conduct of the prosecuting team. Were you shocked by the explanation, first of all, given by the judge?
Thank you very much and good evening. I was shocked but not surprised. And here's the context. It is one thing for a case to be thrown out for lack of credible, substantive evidence linking the accused to the crime with which he or she has been charged.
Yeah.
But it's something else when the accused is acquitted consequence to the litany of errors and theoretics on the sideline. Because if you listen to the judge, she was scathing. First, on the unethical conduct and misbehavior of the prosecutorial team. These are, the prosecutors in South Africa is what is called dominus litis. They are the dominant aspect of every prosecution. They commence and end every criminal prosecution. All right? So the onus is on the state to prove their case beyond any reasonable doubt. Right. Because the judge, listen to what the judge says. She didn't believe the accused, Omotoso. But that she didn't believe him didn't mean that his version could probably and possibly be truthful.
Right.
And that's where the state needed to cover. They had a list of witnesses.
Right.
They had the crime scene. They had a team of investigators. They needed to ensure that they go for a kill when you prosecute a matter like this. But here's a problem.
Right.
The usual problem in South Africa is twofold. Is this, we need to disabuse ourselves from categorizing certain cases as so-called high-profile cases. Because if you have a case that is so-called high-profile, then you compel the NPA into erratics such as this because they are acting under public pressure, political pressure, and public opinion pressures.
But surely they're mature enough to be above that, Thabo.
They should be.
Or they should be above that. But talk to us about the influence of the media as well as the public on the execution of the prosecuting plan.
Exactly the point that I was trying to make. Because we classify certain cases as so-called public high-profile cases, we therefore compel a narrative that makes investigators and prosecutors act under pressure and in the process commit such erratics. And there are many such cases.
Right.
I can mention one in Mpumalanga, you remember, where some accused in the murder of the child linked to an EFF leadership. You know, you mentioned many other cases. Those cases, because of how we classify them, we therefore, and this is not excusable, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not excusable under any circumstances because prosecutors, the NPA slogan is simple.
Right.
They need to act without any fear or favor.
Right.
But here's the problem. In South Africa, because of the poor state of police quality training, police arrest to investigate, when in fact it should be the contrary or the other way around. Police need to investigate thoroughly, collate all pieces of evidence that will stand the scrutiny of cross-examination in court and then effect an arrest. But now that they do the other way around, and therefore they find themselves pushed in a corner where they have to act under public pressure and finding themselves committing such unethical actions, and which a lot of them borders on, quite frankly, misconduct.
Matome Chidi, do you agree with that assessment from Thabo in terms of how the criminal justice system is working currently? Oops, we don't seem to have Matome. Control, let's fix that and bring him back into the conversation. Thabo, I want you to, and it's something that we heard from the judge, in trying to explain the legal position, right? Case law. The judge referenced a case which stated that, and these so-called high-profile cases gives the public, or gives us as lay people, an opportunity to understand the workings or the inner workings of the court and how the judge reasons. Now, she said that in reference to one of the cases prior, that the court doesn't have to believe the defense's story, still less does it have to believe it in all its details. It is sufficient that it thinks that there's a reasonable possibility that it may be substantially true. How are we expected to understand it? Help us understand that.
In fact, the prosecutors and the NPA need to use these so-called high-profile cases to help the public zoom into the court proceedings. How evidence is led, how evidence is prepared, how cross-examination is run, how character evidentiary burden is led, so that the public gain confidence of how the court system works. But here's the thing. There's a saying in our law, based on a universal principle, that courts, and this is a principle of erring on the side of caution, and this is where the judge came in to say, I don't believe this man's version, but that I don't believe it doesn't mean it may not be true. So this is how it's based on this universal principle.
That's a reasonable doubt, right?
Yes. The universal principle says, courts would rather acquit a possibly guilty individual than convicting a possibly innocent person. Because the ramification and consequences of having someone sent in jail for an offense that they may not have committed is much more graver and injustifiable than the consequences of acquitting someone who could possibly be guilty. Because if this new evidence emerges that this person that was acquitted is actually guilty, a person may be rearraigned, may be subpoenaed, may be rearrested when new evidence is led. So courts do err in the side of caution, and the public need to understand that when courts err on the side of caution, it doesn't mean that they actually believe that an accused is acquitted of an offense. It only means that the state, through its prosecutors and the team of prosecutors, have not done what they are supposed to do, bringing the case, bringing evidence that will ensure that they secure a conviction.
That will be so difficult to understand for somebody sitting at home and probably listening to, and I'm not talking particularly about this case, but other cases, especially the ones that are televised, and listening to evidence, and then you get something that you don't expect for many people as a lay person. Now, talk to us about the high bar of reasonable doubt. Help the viewers understand that.
The high bar of reasonable doubt is a compelling onus. It's a compelling onus because the state, remember the state, if you are charged with serious offenses, the state opposes what is called bail, right? So in other words, this man has already been in custody for what, 8 years? So it means your freedom is already denied. So it is expected of you as a state to prove beyond any reasonable doubt, so that there must be no doubt existing to show that this person has committed the offense. In any event, you are armed with all litany of instruments. The police, investigators, sometimes who are senior, who investigate on your behalf. We are armed with a correctional service system that keeps the accused secured. You are in rape cases, for instance, we are also armed with what is called forensic laboratories, where you can go and test specimens. You know? So I'm surprised, and I hear your journalist, your analyst journalist, when she was actually outlining how the state reacted during cross-examination. Cross-examination is an opportunity to discredit evidence, to discredit witness, to discredit, but also it's also an opportunity to bring before the court evidence that may not have been clearer during chief examination.
Yeah.
So it's quite sad, and it's a sad day and a regrettable day for victims of crimes.
Right.
When they had to endure the 8 years of this public scrutiny, public humiliation, pain and suffering, and yet come the end of a trial like this, no justice would prevail. And it goes back to this thing that the principle that justice must not only be done, but it must manifestly seem to be done.
Correct.
And I think I have my deepest sympathy to the families of the victims and those complainants who have actually brought this matter
That
before
dictum lends itself to the veracity of certain cases whereby justice must be seen to be done. It's important. It builds trust. Something that we would love to have put to the NPA. We did invite them onto the program. They weren't available. We need to find out what are the shortcomings.
Yeah.
No doubt, as I said at the top, there's fact and field. This is a very emotive case, right? But we need to separate in terms of how the NPA has progressed, because if you look at some of these statistics, 2023, 2024 report, if we have it, let's put it up, Control. There's over 90% conviction rate in terms of cases in the High Court.
Yeah.
So that's one would consider relatively good, right? So we need to take that into consideration. The prosecution team for Omotoso cases, there's going to be an investigation. We will see what comes out of that. We've been urged by the NPA not to jump to conclusions while the investigation. I think that's important, right? Because there are lives at play here. Their lives involved, their families involved as well. So it's important for us to report responsible. I want to, before I go to my guests, Mr. Chidi and the digital audience, I want to get your take. A regular Word on the Street feature, we took to the streets seeking your views on this matter. This is what you had to say. Take a look.
I don't think it's a good thing that he was found not guilty because of his track record, and so many people have come forth with so much evidence, and to have that ruled out is not fair on ordinary South Africans.
I think I speak for a lot of people if I say it depends on who you are, how much power and influence you have, I feel like the people who have power, who have money, always get away with a lot.
There were witnesses, there were people who experienced it, people who had that trauma. And this guy, as soon as the first witness passed away, the case was just shut. Now he's being sent back to Nigeria as a free man.
I feel like it hasn't been effective because now the justice system is failing us as women, and now we do not feel safe, going around. So now when we go around, we have to be watching our backs.
I think our justice system is corrupt, and a lot of people get away with bribery and corruption.
I think out of respect for our constitutional dispensation, we must understand how the law works. The law has nothing to do necessarily with morals and ethics. It's about certain principles that without which a person would be, vindicated. If something is not proven, it's not proven.
Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. Question of the week. We ask you, what do you make of the NPA's handling of the Omotoso case? Let us know at SABC News_TV. We did invite the NPA to be part of this program. They weren't available, but we have good, strong legal minds to give us fresh perspective on this matter. I want to bring in one of them, attorney Matome Chidi, joins us digitally. Matome, thank you very much indeed for your time. Look, my kind of experience with presiding officers, be it magistrates or judges, is that they normally tend to stick to the facts when delivering their judgment. But Judge Irma Schoeman decided to comment on the performance. Did that take you aback a bit? Did that shock you?
It didn't, and in fact, it is his obligation to do so. It is the judge's obligation to do so. I mean, it comes from facts which served before the judge, and the judge made an assessment that on the following grounds, they could be misconduct, they could be unethical conduct. But it was out of concern as well, I take it from the judge, that there are certain charges, about 31, on which evidence was not led. And yet the prosecution proceeded to deal with the case. And of course, some of the issues have been recorded already, that a specific witness was encouraged to come and commit perjury and lie basically in court. So those would be some of the things that a judge would say, I can't ignore these things, because this person is an officer of the court, is appointed by the court to ensure that the court is assisted and there's justice that is delivered to the people. So it was the obligation of the judge to make that comment.
From what Thabo said earlier on in terms of how the criminal justice system works, how the police are conducting their investigations, what do you make of the system currently, and where are the wins, where are the shortcomings?
Yes, I'm sorry I was not able to follow him, but I'll comment about my assessment, at least from experience as a practitioner, of how the system works. You know, this is one case, and we can't take this case and say this is something that should indicate to us how the criminal justice system works and how NPA works as well. So, but it's important, because if it happens in the Eastern Cape, I can tell you that we've got some of these experiences, even in Limpopo, where you know, they would be isolated in certain respects, and the degree to which the conduct would be worrisome would not be the same. This is one of those worst cases that I've ever came across. But in every situation, there's always space to improve. And I think NPA is taking the issue seriously, and they're likely to investigate. But we can't take this case and say that necessarily this is how we should assess the NPA, worrying as it is, of course.
Point. Michelle, let's hear from you.
Thank you so much, and I think based on everything that's been said this evening, I think without a doubt here the NPA did fall short, just in terms of how state prosecution was conducted, and also just with the level of care that a public case of this was given. And I think as much as yes, we cannot use one case to assess the NPA's conduct in I do think it does set a precedent. It also needs to really take on can be improved, and also just how to better mitigate mistakes.
Yeah. Zin, we had every corner for the last 8 years assessing this case from inside and out. When you heard that outcome, your reaction?
Well, I was so disappointed, and we gave our faith to actually NPA to do the job and also prosecute the victim. The accused. Yes. So. Yes, the NPA has faced, criticism for not ensuring a more efficient and, process when this case took place, and which caused frustration, not only frustration to the victims, but also to the public. So for me, it really shows that there is a broader crisis in terms of accountability in our country, in terms of, such cases of gender-based violence and human trafficking. And also when these high-profile cases collapse or fails, it actually undermines the public trust and encourages these perpetrators to continue doing such, criminal conduct. So we are very disappointed as the public. Thank you.
William, what questions do you have? What's swirling through your mind when you assess the past 8 years?
Thank you. I'd first like to start by offering my condolences and support to all of the victims of these cases. One of my questions would be, how can we as the young people, because there's a lot of tradition and culture, especially in South Africa, where we have to look up to our elders. We're not allowed to question them, especially in positions of authority such as the church. How would we go about reporting this and doing something about it, without getting into too much trouble and still respecting people and everything? if you'll give me some time, I'd like to highlight some of the key facts that I found from the last 8 years. So
just
specifically,
pause that, William. Pause that, William. Let's get an answer for you, Thabo. You know, speaking on another news channel, Advocate Chamila Botoy said that there are thousands of sexual and GBV cases being prosecuted, and most of them, she says, were successful, and that the hope is that this case doesn't prevent or deter people or women, victim survivors, coming forward and laying their complaint and trusting the system. From your hearing William's question, how do you think that can unfold, or how do you think that it can better be handled?
Thanks. The sad thing is that Botoy may actually be correct, statistically and factually.
Yeah.
She may actually be correct. But you see, when so-called high-profile cases like these get into the fore, the public is deprived of an opportunity to do what is called a holistic assessment.
Yeah.
And there's something very tricky even about this case, which links to what William is talking about. The culture and tradition is the church. This is where people are expected to go and confide. The accused is the head of the church, the pastor, somebody to whom a lot of these women confided, father, daddy, whatever the description were. So not only does it erode trust and confidence in the criminal justice system, but lack of conviction in this case also erode trust and confidence of what William is talking about. The relationship between five. It's bad the case of a child accusing a stepdaddy of rape. But here's the thing. There's a man somewhere in Pietermaritzburg, an old man, who has been in prison for more than 20 years, if I believe. I think I saw this in one of the social media, what you call. There's an outcry for justice for that man because apparently, after so many years of him being convicted of an offense, the alleged victim or complainant has suddenly confessed that, in fact, I was forced by my mother to implicate that man. So in other words, there's a call to review that case, to come and check evidence and see if that there can be justice for that man. So courts are found in a serious predicament, my brother, where they have to balance not just the interest of victims, but also to be able to navigate and scrutinize instances where there may be manipulation. And this is where the judge came in very harsh and said she's appalled at the level of unethical misconduct by the state prosecutors who actually created WhatsApp groups for witnesses, who manipulated, who changed versions, never compiled any statements of affidavits. So it tells you that there was an attempt to unethically interfere with evidence in this case, and that is a regrettable state of affairs.
Right. We must just say that that is a matter of investigation as well. So hopefully we'll get some answers in terms of those allegations. An important point, Tabi, you mentioned as well is, and generally, I'm talking generally, it's something that the SABC is focusing on as well. Places of safety, regarded as safe, not necessarily being safe.
Schools, for instance.
Schools, example. It's something that we need to dig a little deeper in. And the public is crying out for that. The public is crying out not only in urban areas, in rural areas as well. We saw on Friday that a group of students came to the SABC appealing to the media to look at these cases that are in rural areas, to highlight these valid points, and something that we're doing as well. So you make an important point. Noel, your take. Your question.
Good evening to everyone in studio and to the viewers at home. So the Omoto case has exposed serious concerns about the NPA's ability to manage complex, high-profile prosecutions involving sexual and GBV cases. Despite the seriousness of the charge, I think that the case was marred by procedural failings, as we've realized, and tellingly, cross-examination lasted less than half a day unusual in a case of this magnitude, indicating a prosecution that was ill-prepared and evidence that could not withstand scrutiny. Moreover, consolidating numerous charges into a single overly complex trial may have weakened the case, in my opinion, and a more strategic, targeted approach could have made the proceedings clearer and more effective, persevering both judicial efficiency and public trust. In light of the public interest and perceived mishandling of the case, one is compelled to ask, is there not a need for an independent review of the NPA's conduct, and might such a step help restore public confidence in how prosecution of this nature or prosecutions rather of this nature are handled?
All right, Mr. Chidi, just keep that in the back of your mind. I'll come to you to get a comment on that. Let me take Solomon in the meantime. Solomon?
Yeah, thank you. I really was sad when I heard about the verdict, and looking at it from a perspective of somebody who, Abdul being a journalist, I belong to the church community, and like the legal mind in the studio said, a church is supposed to be a place of refuge. It's supposed to be a place of safety. And I knew about these issues and these cases concerning Omotoso. I knew the victims even before he came out, before he was arrested. Myself and the late Pamela Mabini, who was shot a few weeks ago, we worked closely. She covered the PE Eastern Cape victims, and I covered like the Johannesburg, side of things. And when I had the verdict, it was really sad, because I deal with these victims almost every week, and you get to hear their story. And for me, it was a case of what happened. That was the big. I sent Cheryl Zondi a message the same day just so I had to know that she must stay strong. But I was left with, after so much advocacy, I was left with the question, what happened?
Right.
I knew Omotoso did his best to get the best lawyers. He did his best. Somehow, a lot of the victims received threats and intimidation. They didn't give in. So the question was what happened? And I'm beginning to think, was there an infiltration by Omotoso's team into the NPA, into the prosecution team? Because it seems like the case was thrown away, right? It was more like some basic stuff that was supposed to be done. So
look, we'll see.
When we have...
we'll see what the report kicks up. The NPA, as you know, the NDPP is called for a report. We're told that that report will be handled from a national or managed from a national perspective. So they'll go to the region, the Eastern Cape region, for information. But this will be largely controlled from a national point of view. Let me bring in Matome Chidi to pick up on Solomon's point as well as Noel. I was listening to the Commission for Gender Equality chairperson saying that what is the point of having specialized courts if we don't have specialized prosecutors? Is there a need to review the skill set of our prosecutors, or are we just blowing things out of proportion? We have the skill set. This is just one case that is tainting the image of the NPA. Your thoughts, Mr. Chidi?
Look, my view is this. This is, and of course, it's from the judgment. It's not from anything that I may have observed or anything. But when you read the judgment, or listen to the judge as well, commenting on what she observed to be what appears to be unethical conduct. And this is what actually happens. An email is generated by the prosecutor. He says this specific witness made a statement. This is the version that was made, but it appears there's a different version. But we must coach this particular witness to stick to the first version. And this is where the perjury thing comes, because that borders on unethical conduct. But then what is interesting, and this is the conduct of a prosecutor who may have reasons and motives, possibly bad, for advancing the case in the manner that he did. Then this email is sent to two superiors in the NPA. So these are the persons to whom the prosecutor reports. But the two superiors allow the prosecutor who generates the email to further prosecute the case. And that then tells you that this is a case of individuals who deliberately in the matter may have appeared to misdirect themselves, but then perhaps the NPO, what it must do, and this is what I think it should do. Yes, I agree. There should be a review of what should be punitive measures when this kind of things happen, because they affect many in society. It's not the isolated case. Possibly, if there were to be a review of the entire system, I don't know whether we may have resources to do so, but at least you sample in each province per each specific offences. If you sample, you may find more evidence that may tell you that the system should be improved. But the only thing that you can do is to penalize people for their individual conduct, because the system is not bad. The problem is the people who are in the system and who are acting in the manner that is reported to have been the case in this particular matter.
If, Thabo, the prosecution team is found wanting, post the investigative report that will be handed over to the NDPP, what's the possible sanctions here?
That's what I wanted to come to say, here's a sad reality. Notwithstanding the outcomes of any investigation internally by the NPA of what happened, and I saw the Justice Portfolio Committee, the minister as well, they've asked for a report, Justice Portfolio Committee in Parliament. I know out of the report, they will probably recommend sanctions. But no matter what those sanctions, they will not bring back justice for the victims or the complainants. Because of the principle of double jeopardy, no matter what is found in a report, investigation report, all what can happen is what Chidi say. There will be consequence management, people will face the might of the law, disciplined and stuff like that. But what about the victims? Who, as a result of this misdemeanor, as a result of this misconduct, have now lost relief. So the court,
what recourse do they have?
The prosecutor can't appeal. The prosecution team can't appeal this because just on the face of what the judge has said, they don't have merits of success in the higher court, which is the Supreme Court of Appeal, or a full bench for what matter in the Eastern Cape. That's what makes this very sad. And it's a serious indictment, not just on the prosecutor, or on the NPA, because the NPA is supposedly acting on behalf of the public, members of the public. And it's a serious indictment for them going forward.
Just before we go, I just want to clarify something. You said the prosecution can't, or you feel, it's your opinion, that they don't have a leg to stand on in terms of appeal, because they say they are assessing the situation.
Remember, prospect of success are based on two things. You must challenge, you must allege that the sitting judge has erred on the areas of law and of facts. But we now know that the judge has outlined a number of behavioral things which has resulted in this acquittal. So I don't think, and I'm sure they can seek a senior counsel opinion to that extent, I just don't think that if they were to appeal this, they stand any prospect of success. More so, because of the principle of double jeopardy, I don't think it's constitutionally fair for that man to be tried again on similar charges unless new evidence, and here's a big unless new evidence arise that point to other incidents, perhaps related to this but not as part of the witness list of those what you call. But you can't charge someone twice over the same offense in law.
We'll have to leave it there and see how this all unfolds. Thabo, thank you very much indeed for your perspective. Matome, thank you very much indeed for your perspective as well. Value added and no doubt a plus for the audience. Digital audience, appreciate your time. As always, we are richer and better for your comments. Thank you very much indeed. All right, before we go, here's my take. Look, I've said this before, and it's worth repeating. Crime takes a huge toll on its victims, be it physical, emotional, even financial. And you'd expect prosecution of those responsible for unashamedly stealing from you, who hurt your family, who hurt this country. Those expectations are not unreasonable. And as you heard Thabo said earlier on, the dictum, justice must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done. It rings true. It lends legitimacy or veracity to the fight against crime. But we also have a responsibility as citizens to speak out and help strengthen cases that eventually land up in court. In some cases, that's easier said than done, but the principle applies. The aspect of moral responsibility in the name of progress and a better life for you and your family. Strong civil participation is key. And I'm not, for one, putting the loss these cases on you. No, that's not the point. What I'm trying to do is make the argument for a holistic approach to strengthen our criminal justice system. And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube as well as SABC Plus. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.